Hi, my name is Josh Kahn, and I'm a Principal Solutions Architect at AWS. Over the past few years, I've had the opportunity to work with the team at Vyaire Medical. Our initial work was focused on building an enterprise landing zone that allowed Vyaire to migrate its on-premise workloads, as well as workloads in another cloud provider to AWS. I also had the opportunity to work with today's speaker, Gopal Ramamurthy, Senior Director of Analytics and Enterprise Data Management at Vyaire. Gopal led a major initiative at Vyaire known as Project Insight. The goal of this work was to pull together data from almost a dozen disparate ERP and other legacy data systems into one analytics platform. Little did we know when we first launched Project Insight that it would play such a key role for Vyaire in the coming year. Vyaire manufactures respiratory care products. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, they had to quickly scale up their operations to meet demand for products such as ventilators that have been incredibly important in treating COVID-19 patients around the world. Project Insight allowed Vyaire to make data-driven decisions about manufacturing and business operation needs. Vyaire was also able to improve manufacturing throughput by leveraging data captured in Project Insight as part of a machine learning model. Gopal is here today to tell you how Vyaire used analytics and machine learning tools on AWS to change decision-making and rapidly scale its production capabilities in the face of a monumental increase in demand. AWS services such as Amazon Redshift, Amazon QuickSight, and Amazon Elasticsearch service provided Vyaire with a highly integrated, scalable analytics environment that allowed Gopal and team to rapidly deliver new features and key metrics across Vyaire's business. Now, I would like to turn it over to Gopal.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody around the world. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Gopal Ramamurthy. I'm from Vyaire Medical, Senior Director for Enterprise Data Management and Analytics here at Vyaire. I'm here to talk through an exciting, topic that we experienced, how actually Vyaire used AWS Analytics services to ramp up our ventilation production during this pandemic situation. So here are the major topics we will be talking through part of the session today. If you look at it, it's kind of the four main themes. First I wanted to, of course, maybe not a lot of people know about Vyaire, who Vyaire is. We'll talk through it real quick, and then moving on, we'll talk about how our analytics journey, went on along with AWS, and how that analytics journey turned out and helped us on the COVID-19 situation where we had to ramp up our production massively, which we're going to talk about a lot, and how our company actually transitioned from kind of ad hoc decision making to kind of data driven decision making, particularly to answer all the demand we had during the pandemic situation. So who's Vyaire? So we are a privately held med devices manufacturing company. 100% of our products are focused on respiratory care, basically, which is very sensitive because it is a life-saving device which we actually manufacture. We have several kind of products when you talk about respiratory, airway management, ventilation, respiratory diagnostics. All these are all like pro products in different spaces. Pretty much everything actually, like I said, just touches on respiratory related illness or life support and ICU and stuff like that. So it's a really sensitive product, and every Vyaire citizen I call, pretty much so tied to that product because we are in and out, care about the product we are manufacturing and putting it out to save lives out in the world. And particularly during pandemic, it actually came out a big time, which is basically the ventilation. Across different platforms, we have about 27,000 plus products, which is all focused on respiratory devices. And we are actually a company carved out from a bigger med device company called Becker and Dickinson, and we are actually a company of merger and acquisitions, which we'll actually talk through in the subsequent slides. So how did we start our AWS journey? So that is where I want to kind of start this discussion. So like I mentioned, this is a company that was kind of a conglomeration of multiple smaller units from different bigger companies like CareFusion, BD, those kind of huge enterprise. Apex is a private equity company who actually owns us. They carefully selected all the respiratory related business from all these big manufacturers and put us together, which actually formed as Vyaire. The reason I want to kind of mention that is because that comes with a lot of complexity, a lot of ERP system in all workloads, pretty much on-prem around the world. So we wanted to actually, we had some presence in Azure where we had some workloads running for specific ERP systems, but not everything. We had majority of the workload still was in on-prem. So we started off the journey with actually migrating, our cloud services into basically cloud-to-cloud migration, and then followed by on-prem workload migration. One of the major reasons we actually went with AWS, which I wanted to highlight here, is it's not about optimizing the cloud services. We want to move to AWS. The bigger portion of it is there were multiple reasons. Particularly, I want to talk about the analytics services offerings they have, integration services they have, which is so key for our organization, where we have dispersed system which we need to bring it together more from reporting standpoint, and multiple other applications we have internally. So from that standpoint, we have started the journey. And like Josh mentioned, when we started the session, he talked about Project Insight, which was focused on single source of truth for analytics throughout the company, where people can come into this platform, get the data, and trust that this is actually the single number they can basically use. So both the initiative kind of took on parallelly, and was going on pretty good speed. A lot of details behind it, which I'll talk through it. But the thing I wanted to highlight is, we were going smooth on the migration, and then Insight actually about to go live, earlier this year, March 2020, and that's when COVID hit us big time. Where we are talking about like rolling out analytics for the entire enterprise, and kind of focusing on how do we increase adoption for the analytics. Sudden shift to, now you have to really ramp up your production and find all possible ways to support this ramp up. And that is where the analytics actually came in pretty handy, which we'll actually walk through in detail. So step back, just to understand how the Project Insight launched a little bit more. So back in 2018, when the company was actually spun off from BD, we pretty much had kind of disintegrated system, no centralized data warehouse. We had multiple reporting tools. We have a complexity of multiple business processes. We are a company operate from 40 different countries around the world. So that can tell you the story, like how complex and diverse our business is. So bringing this together is going to be kind of key goal, which is kind of obvious. But how do we do this in such a short time, and bring basically a technology to support the requirement, and also have an alignment with all the business leaders to make sure we are walking in the right path. So that was took us quite a bit of time, but we were able to align, and that's how Project Insight actually was formed, with the tremendous support from executive leadership team, particularly my CIO Drabaki, who stand by this, and then made it happen, in my opinion. And now that we have a problem statement, how do we solve this? We knew that one of the reason, as I mentioned before, we chose AWS because that is our foundation, not only for cloud services, even analytics services. So we wanted to actually get into that space and make sure we turn on all the viable services to actually make this platform such a scalable, flexible platform. The reason is, we have diverse business unit aligning on rules, on KPIs. It's actually cannot be overnight. It has to be incremental, which means you're prone to changes. So our walking in requirement for a technology is basically, we want something that is can scale up and down quickly, where it is flexible enough to make changes. And obviously it cannot be on-prem solution, so it has to be a cloud native architecture. Those are the I would say incoming assumptions. So with the given problem statement, we came up with a conceptual architecture, which is traditionally, kind of, I would call it more like a 4-layered architecture, where you have your source system, and then you have your kind of the processing layer, and then you have your semantic layer, and then the the visualization, basically a consumption layer for end users. So, which is pretty much, any analytics architecture you look at, this is how it is going to be designed. But the difference in our approach is, like I said, the agility, flexibility, and scaling up and down is going to be mandatory, which means we want to design this architecture more cloud native, which can actually scale up and down, depending upon the requirement, and flexible enough. So given that, as a constraint, or I would say, like, leading in assumption to this design, source systems, Josh mentioned about like dozen ERP, which we have, that is basically your source. And then coming into, kind of your, I would call it data lake. When we started gathering information, it was more like a swamp, not really a lake. And we used, lake house methodology, which we'll talk about in the subsequent slides, where we actually brought the information, consolidated, basically in one platform. So for this, data ingestion component is going to be key, because now we are talking about ERPs that are well mature, from kind of the SAPs of the world, and then down to appointment made to manage, which we never heard of these ERPs. So now you have variant technology, so you want a strong integration layer. So we want to make sure we have a tool that can be a good data ingestion integration tool to get the data into the lake. And then after that, once you land it in the lake, then subsequent processing is going to be key. And we want to make sure we pick the right storage layer, which is going to be key here. Any data warehousing solution, two main things you look at is, what is going to be my storage backend, like the database, and then how am I going to visualize the data? As I mentioned before, we had 5 to 6 different reporting tools. Are we going to actually use one of the reporting tools? Are we going to look at anything new? Because we have to look at and make sure it can have a good interoperability. It can actually be economical to actually make sure we can cater all the users around the world. So a lot of factors went in. So those two definitely we focused on, which is something I'm going to talk about in a sec. But within the processing layer, we had very minimal layers, I would say, in terms of processing, and getting the data in a cleansed, standardized format is what we focused more on. What I mean by that is, when you have order information or customer data coming from different ERP system, it can be of different formats. So aligning them to a standard format is going to be key. And that is really what we call it, kind of the processing layer. Once it is done, then your semantic layer, we kind of kept it open, meaning it is going to be more fluid, because the open order, for example, a definition of an open order changed 10 times in our company. Maybe it sounds familiar for you too. If I actually had to build all this logic in the back end, and the rule changes, you think about the traditional way of doing it. You got to reload the data, and all that fun things you have to do, which actually increases the number of days you spend to scale up your solution, right? So that is why we want to make it more, I would say, dynamic. So the semantic layer was built on top of some kind of views and stuff like that. Conceptually, that was our thought process. Then walking into your visualization layer, that is where it was a little bit tricky when we started the journey, where we wanted to actually have kind of a fixed portal, and that portal is called Insight. That's how the project got that name. And within this Insight portal, when the end user comes in, they are basically abstracted from which reporting tool we are using. All they would see is a portal with actually little icons. They just open the icon, the dashboard opens, they get the information they want, and then they walk away. And then the same platform we were able to provide in web browser, in the desktop, as well as in the mobile device. So all this kind of accounted, and conceptually we know all the blocks we wanted to actually assemble in these 4 layers. Then, like I said, we had to carefully choose some of the AWS services, to name a few. Like I said, the 3 major components, Redshift for a database, and then QuickSight for basically your visualization, and then Elasticsearch actually came in, I would say, halfway of the project, when we actually found use case for that, which I'm going to talk through in a sec. So on the Redshift side, it was a pretty close when we started this journey, back last year. I would say May June timeframe. Redshift was right there, but there were other competitive tools, which was actually you can use the service through Amazon available. So we did do a POC to actually understand, how does Redshift actually rack up to other tool set. It was pretty close, but in some areas maybe it was kind of little short, but we knew that going all in AWS will actually reap a good benefit for us, because they had a really rich roadmap, and then they kept on their promise again and again, which is exactly what happened on Redshift. When I look back about a year, where we were when we started the journey versus where it is right now. So that was a pretty good choice. Some of the highlights I want to call out was when you use Redshift and then other Amazon services, like QuickSight is the visualization tool we have picked, which actually has a tremendous interoperability, if you think about it. So staying with the kind of the cloud native interoperable tools actually leverages a lot of benefits in terms of having the resources kind of cross trained, and you can have more optimal cost, which actually enabled us to choose these two services. But along the way, we also ran into a situation where we want to give kind of a search analytics kind of scenario or use case we ran into, where we actually created directly from our portal. And that's where Elasticsearch, the need for Elasticsearch came in, and it came so handy. And we were able to build kind of our own custom search analytics off of our portal. So I'm going to talk a little bit, more about the architecture side of it, like physical architecture. How did it, pan out? Starting from the source system, where I talked about like SAP, all the down to like JD Edwards and all these ERP system, where we have to ingest the data into our data lake. So for ingesting the data lake, we chose Talent as the tool, which is kind of really popular for platform independent integration, no matter whether you're connecting to the database or you're connecting to SAP connectors and whatnot. So it actually had really good options for us to do the integration. So we landed the information in our lake. Obvious choice for lake would be your S3, and like I mentioned before, it was more of a swamp to begin with, and then we took that data and kind of cleansed the information, basically standardized information. One is cleansing, of course. Yeah, we did that bare bones, and then standardizing the information to actually fit it in the order model, which I talked about across the enterprise. Then we took that information, actually wrote it back to lake, kind of used the lake house, I would say, principle for our more machine learning modeling and all that good stuff, which I'm going to talk in a second. So if you follow left to right, we started with the source system. We used Talent to ingest the data into our lake, and then we moved on and then tackled the processing within Redshift using our integration tools. After that, once we actually process the data is pretty much ready for consumption. And here, like I mentioned before, the architecture is not too much layered, like where we keep transforming the data. It was like basically 1 or 2 hops max, and then you have the void data warehouse table available for you. Then we built our semantic layer using Redshift views, where we actually had rules built in, like I mentioned before, your open orders or back orders, what would be the rules. And once your semantic layer is established, then comes the whole inside portal framework, where it is actually, like I mentioned, is a custom portal. And the entire architecture, if you look at it, it is a serverless architecture, and cloud native serverless architecture. And within the part where we designed the inside platform, it was actually completely written using lambdas, which actually executes the core logic. And then the website was actually hosted out of our S3, and the front end was written in React Native. It's a pretty cutting edge portal, which actually seamlessly integrates in mobile. So when you look at it in the desktop versus mobile, there is really minimal work we did. The user experience was amazing. Just to add to kind of icing on the cake would be QuickSight mobile was amazing. We didn't do much other than just embedding that dashboard in our inside portal. The same embedded dashboard would look amazing when you're browsing in a web browser versus you're looking in a mobile device. So that seamless integration was pretty key here. That actually helped us to not invest too much time kind of juggling between your data desktop design versus mobile design. Then really critical point I wanted to call out it about is our journey into machine learning. So where we are talking about, like SageMaker is where we started adapting, and we started doing some small POCs to see how we can leverage more in the scenarios like demand planning, which was kind of the area where we took on. We're kind of experimenting. This architecture is fully set. We went live basically March earlier this year, and started rolling out to the entire company. And it is the time where we were thinking about, hey, now we turned on all key KPIs like your revenue, daily sales, and you're talking about open orders, back orders. Now it's basically up to the users to start consuming. And then we were hit with COVID, and then suddenly the thought process completely changed, where you're talking about our order volume scaled up 20 times. I mean, one, twice or thrice itself is kind of, sudden, a big jump for us. 20 times is actually, a huge undertake for us. To put it in a raw language, what does it mean? For someone, it's basically, we had to scale up our production to 750 ventilators a day. I mean, it just I get goosebumps when I talk about it, because our normal throughput is about on average about 6 a day, and when you're talking about ramping up from 6 a day to 750 a day, I mean, it is kind of from the sales perspective, it is a positive thing definitely, but looking at the situation, where we are into a pandemic situation, and we have to really answer because there are so many thousands of lives out there where we have to save, and we have to quickly ramp up. So put all this in perspective. It is not about whether we want to take this business or not. It is about saving lives. So we got to get it done, right? So that was a mindset the entire company had. It is not really about I'm going to get more sales, all that. It is about saving lives, as many as we can. We have to save the lives, and this is actually something we have to kind of ramp up within. We are talking about days and weeks. It's not like we have plenty of time. We don't have the luxury of time, as you all know. So from that, so what do we do, right? We basically can't scale up from the operation standpoint. Our factories cannot scale up so much. So the decision at the executive level made was to basically do a joint venture with Spirit, who's known for aero manufacturing, and they have done plenty of high tech manufacturing work on the airline industry. They have done a lot of work for Boeing. So that is the company we decided to partner with, and now we are talking about ramping up a factory within just a matter of days and weeks. So think about operation ramp up, and then the IT system ramp up for manufacturing, and this is where the meat of the analytic services which we actually enabled come into play. Particularly this is some photos from the Spirit manufacturing facility, where you can see like hundreds and thousands of people are sitting in the line, and this huge facility was just a warehouse that was empty, and then we had to completely ramp up and then make it a a factory that is of a standard to manufacture ventilation, which is actually no joke. So just to put things in perspective, I want to call out few analytics that actually really helped to ramp up this production. If you think about when you are actually trying to ramp up production, first thing you want to know is like, hey, what is our supply chain current status? Like you know how much parts do we have on hand? What are the different, how much resources we need to ramp up the production, and what is the order volume? What kind of products are we going to manufacture, and who are the audience we are going to who are the like end users of these devices? Because depending upon which country it goes to, we have to configure different language and whatnot. So many questions in play. So first thing is we have to enable our end users to do data analysis. If you think about it, we were manufacturing like six on average ventilators, where people can get away with Excel. There is really no need to for scaling up like some fancy solution where the people have to look through and then make decision. Now you're talking about 750 a day, and a total about like thousands of ventilators which we have to manufacture with the span of 2 months. So that's where analytics come into play, where we had to kind of organize content all the way from, hey, here is the inventory situation, here are your demand, and if you break down your demand from your product down to like spare parts and like raw materials, here are the things we need. So you got to, here are the things, list of vendors we typically work with. excuse me. And all this information we served up through analytics, which actually helped our supply chain team to come up with the production plan, a massive production plan which they actually came up, which actually constantly changes. When I say constantly changes, it changes pretty much every couple of hours. So our analytics that we are turning around and giving it to our end user, it's not about can we build it, it is also need to be near real time. So we had to refresh our data warehouse every 15 minutes, where AWS services quickly scaled up. If you remember, I talked about requirements where we want to scale up and scale down. So we were able to quickly scale up our services to actually meet this demand. And one really important analytics I want to call out is yield analytics, which actually was key for this production ramp up. What a yield analytics means is when you're actually into a ventilator manufacturing, you want to understand your throughput, right? When you actually put through a ventilator and you do a final test, ventilator actually goes through kind of three stages. The initial stage where they're building, and then the final assembly where they're putting everything together, and then final test. When it goes to final test, and if it passes the first time, then your yield is 100%. If a ventilator takes 3 times, then you're about 33%, right? So our average yield was kind of low numbers, around 30+%. We got to ramp it up to really high, because we can't afford reworking a ventilator 3 times. That means you're tripling all your time, right? So we have to really work on the throughput. So the analytics we put together for yield actually helped the business to understand not only what is the throughput, where is the problem, where they can drill into and look at it at the line level. Who's the employee? What is the mistake they are making? Do they need more training, or is it actually the parts that we received from the vendors that is causing it, as a particular batch? They were able to get down into so much of details, which they were able to randomly do it. And these are the things. It is not like we get a requirement and we do it. It is more iterative. Like, literally, the developers are on the call. We get a requirement, we actually put this together, test it, push it to production. It's like agile was on steroids kind of a situation here. And that's how we actually put together these analytics. And come talk about machine learning. This is going to be kind of an incremental step from the, I would say, prescriptive analytics, where we give people visibility into where they can actually analyze the throughput and all that. Then we actually took it to a different notch and said, hey, we have all this information that is coming out of all these ventilators and the test machines, that actually gives us information about, hey, how is our throughput, and where are we failing, and how are we failing. So we had a different thought process about how about we take this and then we predict failure, right? That's where the machine learning from AWS came in handy, where we use SageMaker models to basically, we use close to about 150 different attributes, where we use variety of attributes to kind of lock in what are the different events that can happen during testing. And like I mentioned, there were 3 stages. After the final assembly, we do some basic testing based on that data, and then the kind of ventilator, and then the historical events, what happened. We were able to kind of put them together and then come up with a model. We trained it for about good, I would say 5-10 days. That's like training for several months for us, given the time frame. And then the model was quickly ramped up to, I would say, 75+% accuracy, which is actually avoiding rework for us. Meaning, we have created an interface and inside where people will come in, put in the ventilator serial number. Right after final assembly is done, it will basically tell you whether to go ahead or basically take it back to rework, and then rework a particular component that might potentially fail. It was actually a huge leg up for us, because not only we are organized to actually make a data driven decision in terms of how to handle the throughput issues. Now we are going ahead and actually trying to tackle kind of more I would say on the predictive side of things, which is actually I would say bleeding edge Vyaire standards, which is actually a pretty cool project. Probably people who worked on this initiative. So I kind of talked about a lot of services we have enabled throughout the course of COVID-19 situation, and kind of talked through how the ventilator manufacturing kind of ramped up with analytics specifically targeted to support our production supply chain, and also the quality side of things which supported. So it kind of felt like, we explored a lot of areas, and then we felt like, we are so mature, but still there is tons to be done internally. And kind of the business process side, there are several areas needs attention on the analytics side. But in order to support all these services, we really need to think about how can we optimize some of the services we have. Also, how can we actually go to the next level using some of the services we are doing. From that standpoint, where are we going from here, right? It's basically like I mentioned, on the integration side, we are primarily using talent to kind of ingest the data. But within the AWS realm, I would say, once the data is landed, it's in the lake, we are thinking about how effectively to use start using glue, because there are several advantages as we are evaluating it. One is the total cost of ownership kind of goes down, and it is kind of a native services which not only can help you to move information around, also it creates your data catalog, which actually goes beyond just moving the data. From that perspective, I would definitely say glue plays a big role in our analytics journey. And then follow on to that, I would say SageMaker, another really really critical tool, part of our analytics portfolio. Like I mentioned, we gave a taste to our business, saying, hey, we can actually predict failures. Now there are obvious questions we need to answer, like, hey, how can we ramp up our get better on our order available dates, like product available dates for our end customers. How can we do better prediction on that, and how can we do better demand forecasting? Can we actually ingest some marketing intelligence, like in terms of opportunity and whatnot? A lot of enterprise gets into this space. The leg up I feel we have is the knowledge within the company, absolutely, from our business users and whatnot. But a good partnership from AWS, where they are actually venturing into this AWS data exchange, where there is tremendous amount of data, where we can actually take like the patient information, not exactly kind of the profile and whatnot, but the patient admittance rate in ICU, and a lot of awesome information available out there in the data exchange, which we are trying to kind of ingest that information along with our corporate data, is what we call external data, corporate data, kind of the matrix, and see how we can actually take this analytics to the next level, and serve better for our end users. So I really want to end this session with a really famous quote from my CIO Ed Ribicki. He basically said, we are now truly a data driven from what was a chaos before. I mean, the presentation you probably watched today would actually kind of justifies that, how we actually ramped up our production, how analytics actually you know um, helped us to make the right decision throughout the course of pandemic, and and not really try to work through your Excel and manual ways of doing things. So this quote really goes well with it, and happy to share with you all. So I really want to thank everybody who actually joined us today, and patiently listened through this session. I'm hoping that the content that was presented today, in some way, shape, or form, helpful for your analytics journey at your own enterprise. And hopefully this session was pretty effective for you, and you can actually take some of these creatives way we did, and put it in practice within your enterprise. Thank you again, everybody, for attending the session. One last request from us would be, if you can kind enough to complete the session survey, and which actually motivates us with all your positive comments, and then any room for improvements will always make us actually make the session better for us in the future. Thank you, and have a good rest of the day. Bye.